Hi everyone, this is Dr. Jordan from Pinnacle Chiropractic, your pediatric and prenatal office in Sarasota, Bradenton, Florida. And today's video is for all the moms and dads who really just want their infants to be as healthy and as vibrant and thriving as possible. And so what does that mean? What does that look like? And that is something that is going to be different no matter who you ask and their training or their experience with that. And so when we talk about an infant who is thriving and doing so well in that 0 to kind of 4 month range where there's still such a extension of you and such a new person, a lot of that comes down to 4 main things, and that is eating, sleeping, pooping, and their motor development. So to give you full confidence as a mom, you are probably doing amazing and doing all things right, but it is really hard when your infant might not act or seem just kind of what you expected them to when you were pregnant. So a lot of times moms have, there's this beautiful idea of how motherhood is going to be and just that it's going to be sweet and a lot of cuddling and baby will just be cooing and all of these things, and hopefully that can be true, but there's also the opposite side of that where motherhood is very raw and postpartum is really hard, and it's especially hard if your baby is not pooping, if they're not eating, if they're having trouble breastfeeding, if they are screaming or crying and you just cannot figure out why and you feel like you're doing all the right things. That postpartum couple months and just their first few months of life can be a really big struggle. And so a lot of times when we see kids struggling in these issues, it's deep rooted, and so it's not something that is easy to go away. It's not something that a medication is just gonna fix on its own, and it usually is something that can kind of be traced back to stress for mom. And so what do we do about that, and will they outgrow it, or is that just something that we hear often from doctors? Because we find that to be the case. Babies don't typically outgrow colic. That stress turns into something else. And so actually behind me you see this picture right here, and this is what we call the perfect storm, but having these symptoms starting early on of colic, of reflux, of constipation, delayed milestones, of tension and tightness and arching, and all these things just starts this big tornado cascade effect that morphs into something else. You don't see a 6-year-old with colic, but you do see 6-year-olds that have many other issues. And it seems like we can look at our intake forms and talk to moms and get kind of a recipe of this exact pattern where it starts as stress when they're babies and then that turns into something else. They might outgrow it, but it just becomes a new symptom or title for something, and then they outgrow that, it becomes something new, and then now we have a lot of issues with our kids these days, and we know we're sadly in a country that's full of a lot of diagnoses and a lot of kids on prescriptions, and we are not the healthiest of people anymore. And so we see this starting from birth, from this infancy stage, and just really morphing into a much bigger problem. So this video is for any mom who really might have an infant who's just struggling and things are harder than you really thought they would be. Maybe more reflux, maybe not any bowel movements, just really stressing and worrying about every little thing because it seems like something in your gut is telling you that things are wrong. And so we see this a lot in our office, unfortunately, but we'll see sometimes moms will have stressful pregnancy, stressful delivery, and so when they bring baby in, baby is really tight. Mom might say, oh, they're really strong, though they can hold their head up. And to us, that's a really big red flag. We don't want any arching, any stiffness. We often see that babies are not breastfeeding well. Mom's really struggling with supply. We will see that kids really hate the car seat and scream the entire drive to our office, maybe screaming at home, not sleeping for any stretch of time, not napping. And there is some grain of salt, I guess, because babies their brain is developing so much. They're growing 200% in the first 2 years. Your child is literally learning so many things. There will be times where they are fussy or grumpy or having a rough day because their brain is literally making these huge developmental leaps forward. And so we often joke that babies are either in a sleep regression or a leap or some sort of like body growth, like a growth spurt is the word. And between those three things, they're always doing something, and so it's so hard once with kids you think you figured one thing out, they'll change the next day. So as soon as you think you've got it as a mom, you think you've got the sleep down, you think you've got the eating down, they're going to change. And so we joke a little bit about that, but it's very, very true that their brain is just tremendously rapidly growing. And so while we see some of these things as common, they're not necessarily normal. And so if you are experiencing an infant who's really struggling and you're trying the gas drops and you're trying to change formula and you're trying to change the nipples on the bottle and nothing is working and the doctor says they're just going to outgrow it and just to wait and things will get easier, that is all where the struggle begins, and something else is definitely going on. And so with our office, we see a lot of basically developmental things, and kids will develop at their own pace. They are all different. They're not computers, they're not pizzas, they don't get delivered on a certain time, they're really not going to develop at a certain pace. But what we care about is things happening in a certain order and with ease. So when we talk about milestones, we really want to talk about, in the first 4 months of life at least, the eating, sleeping, pooping, and then the motor milestones as well, and really mastering all 4 of those. We can't have one of them missing and still have an overall picture of health. And so what does normal look like? And this is where it gets really foggy for some people, because your doctor might say something very different than this. But when we are talking about eating for a 0 to 4 month old baby, we really want them to have a strong latch and feed on both sides. Having a head preference or a breast preference is not normal. We want them to have a strong suck with a latch that is not biting or taking in too much air. So getting a lot of air, getting hiccups a lot after eating, if the half of their tongue is white, if they can't stick their tongue out, those are all things that affect the latching and the sucking. If you notice your child has a little indent on the top of their tongue, like a heart almost, if you notice they can't touch the top of their mouth with their tongue, if you notice a little lip blister on their upper lip, those are all things that their sucking and their latching is not ideal. And so it's something that we definitely need to talk about and work through essentially. And this can be from breast or bottle. So if they're also struggling to bottle feed, we often hear that babies only like Dr. Brown's bottles, and that's also a red flag to us because of how Dr. Brown's bottles are shaped. If that is the only bottle a baby will take, it usually means there is something within the structure of the mouth, the tension, and that orofacial development that is off. And so if they will only take Dr. Brown's bottles or pacifiers, there's usually something going on that's not normal, because that is not a normal shaped nipple and should not be a baby's first preference. So swallowing should be easily controlled. They should be able to speed down and slow down and speed up their nursing as needed. So they should have some control over how much they're taking in. And they definitely should not be spitting up or excessively dribbling or having a lot of milk come back up after they eat, and definitely should not be uncomfortable after feeding. So that's just what normal should look like for a 0 to 4 month old. Sleep is the next thing, and babies should be able to soothe and sleep well in numerous sleeping positions. So it's not normal if a child has to sleep in one position or in a swing or only on their left side or only on their back if it's 6 p.m. and XYZ is happening. After a few weeks, when baby's a little bit older and has a successful eating relationship, they should be able to sleep at least 2 to 3 hour stretches, kind of on that cycle, where they can rest and play and eat in some sort of order, but over a 2 to 3 hour cycle at least. That should start to develop pretty quickly. And then after a couple of weeks as well, they should be able to sleep a little bit longer stretches, as long as they are meeting their nutritional needs and are gaining weight appropriately. And if they have trouble with that, that goes back to our uncommon or unnormal but common eating issues. Babies should also be able to babble and coo within those first few weeks and months. They should be able to bring objects to their mouth and be able to push their legs down when they're placed on a surface. We never recommend helping a baby to stand until they are ready, which is around 9-10 months. Milestones are very important. Children should not be standing before they can sit or crawl. They need to really establish sitting and crawling before they learn to stand, before they learn to walk, and certainly before they learn to jump, which is why we have very strong opinions about exercisers, bumbos, and specifically jolly jumpers, and even forward-facing baby carriers. So those are all things that are really going to cause issue with the order of which milestones happen in, and as well as baby's development, their hips, their spine can be basically harmed or affected by using a lot of those equipments and containers too early. So pooping is the next thing, something I never thought I would talk about so much before I became a chiropractor, but children should be easily digesting their food. So there should be no mucus at all in their poo. After those first few weeks, things should start looking a little bit more normal in color and consistency. They should not be gassy or grunting while they're sleeping. So having gas while sleeping is not a normal thing. Grunting while sleeping is usually a sign of discomfort of their belly. That is also not normal. We should poop regularly, which is different for everybody, but that should be numerous times a day in those first few months of life, even years. So it is not normal for a baby to not poop once a day. It is not normal for a baby to poop every other day. There really should be numerous bowel movements happening per day, and that really should lead through life. The average person should go to the bathroom 2 to 3 times a day, and the first one should be within an hour of waking. So that is a sign of health, is to have healthy bowel movements. It's a window into what's going on in the body, and children specifically need to be going often. If not, it can be a sign of a food sensitivity. It can be a sign of a lot of neurological things going on, subluxation, but there is a bigger conversation to be had. It is not normal for a baby to not go to the bathroom every single day. And a lot of doctors will tell you that it is fine, especially for breastfed babies. That is not the case. And we also don't want babies to be straining or struggling when going. So it should never look painful. It should not feel painful. They should not struggle to get a bowel movement out of their body. So that's another sign that if your baby is really struggling, grunting, making really red faces, pushing really hard, that is not health in their system. So last but not least is that motor function. So I talked a little bit about the strength of holding their head up. We want to see that when they're doing tummy time after the first few weeks, but when babies first come out, we want them to be a really healthy mix of just a little potato where they don't need to be strong. They're not meant to be strong. There is no medal to win for your baby coming out and holding their head up. That is a sign of tension in their body. It's a sign of neurological distress. It's a sign of torsion. It's all of these things that for us are a really big deal and do not mean that your baby is healthier because they can hold their head up at birth. After a few weeks, we do want to see them holding their head up and able to look around and look in both directions and move their neck symmetrically. The first couple days, that is not the case. We want to then start seeing them being able to track objects, to smile at the sound of your voice, to open and shut their hands, to develop their palmar grasp, to bring items to their mouth is how they develop hand-eye coordination. That's also while they will start drooling pretty early on. It's not a sign of teething. It's actually the body's defense mechanism to drool a lot to get bacteria out because they're putting everything into their mouth. That's great, and we want to see them comfortable with tummy time, also engaging with toys and people closer to 3-4 months. Now, if your baby is struggling in any of these areas, that would be a sign that something is probably a little bit off, and that could be a lot of things that might look a lot different for a lot of kids, but that could look like frequent arching of their head, their back, kind of pushing themselves back, especially during diaper changes. If they're doing tummy time, they might hate tummy time, not wanting to be on their tummy, might have difficulty holding their head up, they might excessively cry, they might try to stand up very soon around that 4-month mark. A lot of people think it's really cute, and it's a reflex that they can push weight through their feet, but we don't want them to use that yet. We also might see issues with sleep, with digestion. Immune function would be a really big thing already. Sinus and ear infections can definitely start at this age and should not be normal. There's no reason for them to not have proper draining. Even though the canals are shaped differently at this age, they should still have clear draining. And then if we see excessive crying, like I said, but also the distress, like the distressed, sad cry where nothing is making it better, nothing is fixing it. And that's especially kind of going in line with reduced eye contact, reduced smiling, reduced interaction or babbling, and not imitating any sound. So when we dig down to why all this is happening, the common thing that we have always come back to, we always find on our forms, any doctor trained in the pediatric chiropractic world sees over and over again, is stress. And that stress can be physical, it can be chemical, it can be emotional, but it also can be starting from preconception. So stress before you even became pregnant, stress during that life cycle of the sperm and the maturity of the egg can cause stress in babies, which it sounds crazy, but it's very, very proven that the more stress you have, whether it's chemical, physical, or emotional, during that time, preconception can change a lot of things genetically, epigenetically for baby. Stress during pregnancy, so while baby is in utero, can really affect how they are postpartum. And then especially stress during the labor. So while baby is in the labor process, they definitely can have issues, whether it's interventions, whether it's just a prolonged labor, a very, very fast labor. All of these things really can put physical stress on their brainstem, their cerebellum, which has so much to do with eating, the vagus nerve, socializing, proper movement, pooping. All of those things can be affected by birth trauma. So that's something that we see very, very, very commonly, but any stress during any of that time is really going to kind of affect their delicate nervous system that really should be regulating their function, their tone, their coordination, their immune system, and their digestive system. So when we see more stress throughout any point in that time, we are going to see more stressed out babies. So the more that you are resonating with this video, the more that you should give us a call at Pinnacle. We are really highly trained in helping kids who are stuck in this stressed out fight or flight mode, who are not thriving. Their body's not able to do things like resting and digesting and healing and growing because it is so stuck in that primitive brain. The fight or flight might not be meeting their milestones, not having these normal healthy behaviors, but also at the same time potentially being written off as it's normal, it's happens all the time, I hear this all the time, and being told they're going to grow out of it, because while they might grow out of the symptoms, that stress will stay and it's going to turn into a bigger issue for them. So if this resonates at all, or you have a friend who this sounds like their baby and they're really struggling postpartum, please give us a call, message with any questions. We really are happy to help and want to, start your baby off on a really successful journey through life and prevent a lot of issues going forward, but also just give both mom and dad and baby and everyone a better chance at just living a really fulfilled, healthy life. So have a great day. It was lovely talking to you.